August Wichita housing market data is what we're going to be going over today. But before we get into all that, please like, comment, subscribe, share. All those fun things really help grow the channel and support Wichita, local small business, all of those things that go with that. But let's go ahead and share and just get straight into the data and discuss that. So I'm going to go over local Wichita stats first, then the national trends and data that do affect Wichita for you to help make sense of all this data and all this information around Wichita housing market and how it applies. So first thing to note is the home sales, and this is number of home sales, rose by 3.1% in July compared to the prior year. Let me start my timer so I don't talk too long. Bore you guys with all this so I can move through it efficiently. All right, so home sales was up 3.1%. 819 units sold in July, increase of 2.4% from 800 units in 2023. And then the average sale price, was 254,440. This represents an increase of 3.5% from the July average 2023 at 245. So number of units up 3.1%, sale price up 3.5%. Healthy amount of appreciation and consideration with that. New builds, we had an increase of 9.4% for units, and price was up 0.6%. So really that's flatline prices on all that. And the thing to note here that is significantly different is the number of active units on the market. So 1741 units at the end of July, which is up from 1321 in last year. That's 2.2 months of supply on the market. Let's look at the data to help interpret that and understand it. I'll give you some understanding and then my insights on it all. As typical, everything follows a bell curve in Wichita area. As far as spring and summer, the most active, not necessarily the best time to buy, but that is when people are the most active and the most amount of transactions go on. My opinion right now is one of the best times to be buying a house because you have so much active inventory, sellers willing to negotiate if it's the right time in your life to be buying a house. And we'll get more into that later. The number of units were at 912 for July. In June, we're at 876. Pretty standard, typical bell curve in Wichita. I don't really want to call this business as usual, sales as usual, because the data, these graphs really leave out how much extra work, how much extra consideration is going into all of these transactions. As realtors, we're having to work 2 to 4 times harder per transaction to earn the same amount of sales, the same amount of commission. And so we're working for basically half as much pay. So you're either accepting half as much pay for the same amount of work, or you're working twice as hard from the complexity of the transactions. One cool thing to note, if you look at closed listings by price range, it can vary a lot based on your price point, because in the lower price points, it's very much a seller's market. As you start to get to 250 to 400, you can see where the month supply, this data point right here, gets to 1.7, 2.3, 3.1. And then when you get to 400 plus, it starts to be moving more towards a balanced market, a 4.4 month supply, 4.2, 4.1, 5.8. What that means is that there's more sellers out there than there are buyers, and simple supply and demand of where those things are at. But you have to get to 6 months supply to really be a buyer's market. Is where that's at. But obviously this is a wide range of averages, so you have to kind of take all that into account with it. Every house, every situation is a little bit different, case by case. Closed listings, we did see the average price point come down to 267. We were at 275. This is probably one of the biggest sticker shocks for people to come to stomach in Wichita, is the price of houses and the monthly payment that comes with this, where it's like if you do want a house, you want to achieve home ownership and look at the long-term play of this over the next 3, 5, 10 years, these are the prices where they're at, and they're not coming down. They're not going lower. Because even in 2022, you can see where they held strong all the way throughout the year. And keep in mind, this is just what price point is closing at that time period, not necessarily where your home value price is at. Same thing with green, held pretty steady. But then when you see a dip in price like this for closed listings, it doesn't necessarily mean prices went down. It's just that means people were buying less priced houses, because if they came right back the next month and bought a higher priced house, you didn't lose value. It just took you longer to achieve that value, which is a lot of what we're seeing, is that the value that you're trying to achieve in the market is taking longer to achieve with that. So 2024, you can see where prices are at, kind of following that bell curve too. We'll see what holds true for the rest of the year, but this is what appreciation looks like and what it's supposed to do. And if you own a home, that's what you want it to do. Average days on market, as I said, is rising year over year. Red is 2022, green is 2023, and blue is 2024. So you can see the average days on market as a whole is starting to rise because it's taking longer to sell a house, longer to get the price you want. Not necessarily that there's something wrong with the house. It's just that the market has slowed as far as terms of number of transactions, speed of cycles. Doesn't necessarily mean the price has gone away or the value has gone away. It just means that people don't buy and sell houses as fast as they were before. So 2022, that's what was going on. 2023, that's what was going on. 2024, everything is just slowed in pace, but that doesn't necessarily mean that prices have fallen, as some people might assume that correlate, that is connected, and it's not. So average days on market is 26. To give you an idea of where it's at, median days on market is 8, depending on which stat you look at. Median just means middle. Average is all of them averaged out, basically divided. If you know statistics, you have to kind of delineate between what those two mean. Because if somebody's telling you the average days on market is 8 days, that's not true. That's the middle, because some fly off the market really fast, and usually it's the Instagram cute, like good looking houses that do that present well. And the ones that sit longer, the ones that aren't super presentable, because we're so aesthetic based now that if it looks good, pretty, all that, it'll go. Like, I'll give you an example of one that we just closed yesterday. One of my clients who bought it 2 years ago for $210,000, put about $10,000 of work into it. We sold it for $250,000. And they basically just had better style, better staging, better living situation, and a new owner bought it because it looked nice, it fit well. They could picture themselves starting their house or starting their life in that house, and it's the aesthetic feelings that led to the emotional appeal that got them to pay the price with that. So if you're not appealing to people's hearts and emotions right now at this point, you're missing out on the data and the numbers that go with that. So that's something to take in mind with your average days of market. Just because you have a house and it's this plain old box of square footage doesn't mean that just automatically equates to you're going to get the price that you want out of it, because of what buyers do, and where I've really studied what buyers modern consumer behavior does in this market, not just what the stats and the numbers say. There's hearts and minds and people connected to these numbers, not just a science project. So there's the median days on market. To give you a perspective on active listings, even though we have the most now we've had in the last 4 years, we're well below pre-pandemic levels in 2018 and 19, when we got to 2,000 and 2,500 units on our whole market. So even though we dipped here during COVID and we're starting to slowly rise back up, we're still nowhere near what we were at, 6-7 years ago on everything. So keep that in mind. But active listings by month are climbing, which is a good thing, because this is solving the complaint a lot of people have for there's nothing out there. We don't have enough houses. There's no inventory. What I've come to realize from studying the data of our city is it's just not on the market, or people have not brought it to the market, and now they are. And I could see more of this happening, not only being brought to the market, but also the great wealth transfer of the boomers and older wealth cycle starting to transfer over, which I'll get to in the next report, talking about capital gains, taxes, and all the other things that go with that. So again, kind of like you're saying, like lower price points, usually transacting and moving well, but they still have an average days on market of 45, 56, 49, 34. So it might take 2 to 3 months to sell your house now. So that's something that we have to come to realize. And your bigger, bougier, nicer house is going to take 68 days, 69, 100, 120. So let's look at the data and base things off of that, and don't get fooled by this market median of some realtor throwing stats and numbers at you that aren't entirely fact-based with the data. Take into account data and your emotions. That's my appeal. Average active listings, though, is pretty high, 347, 357, 360. What this graph doesn't entirely tell you or put out there is that just because somebody asks for a price doesn't mean it sells for that. And if it doesn't end up selling, they just stay, is usually the worst case scenario that you have to take into account. That if you can't get that price at that time, it doesn't mean it's not worth that. You just couldn't find a buyer at that time. And so you have to come back later. Make sure you're planning strategically, financially, in a conservative way. This puts you in a good spot long-term, and you're not desperate to sell your house with that. So plan strategically, financially, in a strong way, whatever that is for you personally. Active listings, month supply, I think we're kind of through where the current market is at. Let's go to the national stuff. So the national stuff that I hope you interpret for the local Wichita market, we're going to go over knowing what's happening, understand what's happening, but this is where we can explain what's happening, help you make sense of it all. Big topic of conversation always, as it dictates so much of our career in this profession, is the mortgage rates and where they're at. Basically what the Fed's saying is they're going to maintain for the rest of the year. And that's kind of what I've been saying since the beginning of the year. I wouldn't be real hoped up or hyped up on their speculation saying they're going to drop rates. They keep saying they're going to drop rates and then they don't, or they have a slight variation. I would basically just plan on them not dropping and look at what makes the most sense for your personal life situation. Even though they're saying strongly suggesting a rate cut is likely in September, I've heard that before. I'll believe it when I see it. And they have been declining somewhat, but not too crazy. But unemployment's rate rises again, but still not too wild to look at. Mortgage rates are plunging on the news of weak job growth and rising unemployment. I would be careful to avoid these sensational words like plunging and just look at the data and really where they're at. But they are lower than where they're at in April, from 7.52% to 6.4%. So we are starting to see some relief, and people are realizing like we can't keep putting off our moving plans with everything. So this gives you an idea on how much interest rate matters and why we focus on it so much. So if your loan amount's $500,000, which divide all this in half would give you the best idea of how this applies to Wichita. Your monthly payment would be $35.02 at 7.52%. At 6.4%, you'd be at $31.27. We've been seeing some come in at the 6% range, 6.125% range. And obviously that has a large impact on your financial payment and your decision to move forward, buy a house or not, or sell or not, and all of these financial planning considerations that go into the pretty houses, not just the, oh, I want a bigger house or I want to do this. So let's get to the brass tacks of the numbers. So if you divide all this in half, like $35.02, you'd be looking at like $1,750 a month in payment for a $250,000 house. So that's a big realization people got to have, is when they're looking for a $200,000 to $250,000 house, that's like a $1,750 to $2,000 a month payment now. And I know there's people who want to fight that situation, like, well, I want to pay $1,200 a month or $1,300 a month. It's like, it don't cost that much anymore. Like it costs $1,750 to $2,000 a month to own a house now. And that's something I think a lot of us have to just come to terms with, because we can't afford it, we can stomach it, we can pay it. It's just more of an emotional, personal decision to see the long-term plan of doing that for the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, whatever your long-term life plan is that goes with that. Same thing with lower interest rates, divide that in half. If you're loaning it by $375, again, divide that in half. So you would be close to that $1,500 a month mark at $250 on a 6.4% interest rate. You have a little bit lower credit, you can get a lower rate, but the difference over the life of the loan is $135,000 to take into account. There is a large pent-up store demand that could be released in the marketplace when conditions improve, lower mortgage rates and more inventory. So that could be the case, but this is the thing about a lot of these economists and experts, is they kind of sit on the bleachers and watch from the sidelines, and there's something to be noted and listened to, but more importantly, I look at like what's happening in the field of the people I'm talking to. We do have more listings as of late, basically because current homeowners can no longer put off moving. Like we stalled it out, waited long enough, and people realizing like we got to move, we got to do things. Same thing with commercial investors. Like we can't keep up at this slow rate. And when we say lower, it doesn't mean we're going back to 3% mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are 7%, and the best we may be able to hope for over the next year is 5.5% to 6%. Which honestly, in a lot of ways, is still a good rate. You can still make good long-term financial gains, equity gains, like I was just mentioning with my previous clients who bought 2 years ago and just sold and made a gain of $40,000, tax-free, by the way, which is why real estate is awesome. And then what else do we got? There's some other key things in here. So really what you need to look at, like I typically always look at with my clients, is does this house make the most sense for the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, that kind of thing. And also take into account your price forecast. You got to pay to live somewhere, and also all the non-financial benefits of home ownership. Not to mention, like, home ownership is one good way to build wealth in today's modern environment. You might see some price declines in some areas. You might see appreciation in some areas. My opinion is Wichita is going to continue to steadily appreciate, just because of how much investment and growth and stability we see in our city, from the biomedical campus downtown to Boeing coming in to having stable job sectors besides just aviation, like manufacturing, healthcare, agriculture, with Cargill and a bunch of the other agricultural employers. There's plenty of stable, needed job growth around here. And I see a good amount of people moving to Wichita for more stability of prices and lifestyle and all the things go with it, because it's always been kind of a hidden gem. But I think it's going to continue to be somewhat of a hidden gem, but people are starting to find out. So there's that to take into account. Housing affordability is low for potential first-time home buyers, but slowing price appreciation, lower mortgage rates can help. And honestly, what I see is the great wealth transfer over the next 10 to 15 years of people coming into money from inheritance, from parents, from uncles, from gifts, from all these other things where this pent-up cash was sitting elsewhere that can now go towards home ownership. And it's a good place to put it. And it's that next generation that needs to see the wealth and the income come into their pockets so they can buy houses, progress the cycle forward, and keep moving with all that. So if you're a boomer reading this and I'm calling you out, I am, because we need the economy and the cash to cash flow instead of sitting on it. And it's showing in the data. Last thing I'll note is equity and capital gains. So capital gains is probably one of the coolest things that can go on. One of the biggest things to be concerned about is don't make more than 250,000 on your house if you're single. Don't make more than 500,000 on your house if you're married, because you have to pay capital gains tax on that. There are some other ways to diversify that, but just keep in mind that that's something you'll have to consider when it goes to that. So it's a substantial price impact if you make more than 250 or 500,000 in your house. A lot of Californians are realizing that, some Coloradoans, a lot of Washingtons, New York people where the prices are much higher, they're migrating to lower priced areas, or they're just selling and having to cough that up. I'm not a tax advisor, not a financial advisor, even though I know a lot about a lot of those things. Consult those people if you need to. And really, at the end of the day, this market's hard, this economy's hard, being a real estate agent's hard. There's a lot of changes coming through with the new rulings, new agencies. But honestly, I'm here for it because of how much improvement for the consumer. And as agents, we're seeing a large overhaul in how we operate our profession, which I think is a good thing. And you don't want to wish it was easier, wish you were better, don't wish for fewer problems, wish for more skills, because really that's opportunity. Don't wish for less change, wish for more wisdom. And that's kind of how I'm approaching this whole thing, is just, we got to get better. We got to see where the market's at, meet the demands of the market, the needs of the market, and those that step up and provide a better service model, better business venture, just like all of our most innovative, newest companies out there right now are going to win and going to succeed. But hopefully that helps you understand August, Wichita housing market, how real estate works nationally and locally. If you want to talk with me personally, directly on your personal situation, go ahead and shoot me a message at the links below. Check out some other videos if you want to also, but appreciate watching as always, and I look forward to talking to you soon. See ya.